This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. From the first phone call 140 years ago to mobile video streaming today, AT&T innovates to improve lives. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing the critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for more than 65 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm your host, Bob Considine. Well, the State Department of Environmental Protection is advancing new flood hazard rules based on an assumption of more than 5 feet of sea level rise over the next 80 years. Here to discuss those rules and their impacts on business and residents is NJBIA Vice President of Government Affairs, Ray Cantor. Ray, thank you so much for coming back.
Bob, it's great to be back.
All right, awesome. So let's start off here. What is the DEP seeking to achieve here, and how are they going about it?
Well, obviously, it's a priority of this administration, of the Murphy administration, to address the issues of climate change, both from a lowering of carbon emission standard, but also protecting the public from the potential impacts of climate change. So this is all about protecting the public from the supposed impacts of climate change. And these rules focus on sea level rise.
Okay, and how are they going about it? They're starting a rule, it's a rule process, correct?
So up to this point in time, there have been several stakeholder meetings, which is really a pre-rule process where they've taken some input from the public, organizations such as NJBIA, and they are now in the rule writing process. We don't know exactly what they're going to be proposing, but they pretty much indicated that they were going to be doing exactly that. And we think they will be coming out with a rule. They're saying now the third quarter of this year, okay. So it could happen toward the end of the summer.
Right. So there's a little bit of runway here, but this is obviously some very impactful stuff that we're talking about. When we talk about 5 feet of sea level rise, more than 5 feet over 80 years, they're basing these rules on that assumption. Where did they get that assumption from?
Well, that assumption is coming from a report that was put out by Rutgers in 2019. Okay. It's a report that the department had commissioned from Rutgers. And that report, which was not peer reviewed, by the way, right. Really is an outlier report. It lays out various scenarios of sea level rise, 2030, 50, 2000, 2100, 2150, and it makes certain projections based on certain events happening, certain emission scenarios, and certain likelihood of occurring. And while it's laid out in a table form, in part, and seems fairly factual, it's really an outlier report. The science of climate science, especially of sea level rise, is one that the authors admit is one of deep uncertainty. But this report throws out these numbers as if they're actually going to happen. And it's a very conservative report. It's very outlier. Mm-hmm. Most mainstream climate scientists and even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN panel, predicts much less sea level rise than 5 foot. In fact, 2 major reports just came out this month that projected that under moderate, emission scenarios, which people are gearing toward and which most likely to happen, there may not be much more sea level rise than we're experiencing right now.
Okay, so you mentioned that this report has emission scenarios even as soon as 2030. What are they? How close are those projections to what we're seeing?
Well, again. It's very difficult to predict sea level rise, and that's why people should always be skeptical when people put things in writing and say, here's what's going to happen, right. And then they start regulating, toward those numbers. But you're right, even the 2030 projections, 9 years from now, are falling far short. They're not even going to make their low range projections.
Okay.
So if they can't even project 9 years in advance, you could be a little bit skeptical of their ability to project 80 years of advance and then regulate to that number today.
What do we currently see now? Is there a number that you can throw out there that's kind of what we see in New Jersey and the East Coast?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that sea level rise is happening for a couple of reasons. One, there is some impact that we've seen through climate change and increasing temperatures. But that's a really minor aspect of what we're seeing right now. New Jersey and much of the eastern coast and other parts of the world, have been sinking for thousands of years, coming out of the last major ice age.
Right.
So we're seeing the ground sink. Is
this compaction? Is that what
it's compaction. There are also land use items such as water withdrawal that's dealing with compaction as well. So lots of reasons why the ocean is rising relative to the land.
Okay.
We're seeing, I think we saw over the last century, about a foot of sea level rise. It's a little bit less than 2 millimeters a year.
Okay.
It's really a doable amount. It's something that we could plan for and we could deal with, even 80 years from now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's almost, if you take this equation, it's 16 inches per decade. If with what DEP is saying, you're saying it's just a few millimeters per year.
Yeah, and again, we don't think that projection is reflective of mainstream climate science. It's really, as I said, an outlier, an overly conservative report, and they should not be using it to regulate because it's going to have a tremendous impact on our economy today and people living in New Jersey today.
Let's talk about those impacts. What are we talking about in terms of both current development and future development at the shore?
Well, again, so let's imagine how this plays out. We already have current levels of projected flooding. FEMA puts these maps out, and they'll project flooding at a certain level. You add 5 foot on top of that. You now extend that inland until that water touches the land. So you have a lot more land now going to be presumed to be flooded that has never flooded before.
Right.
Plus, the level that they're projecting to be flooded is much higher. So it's very easy to prepare, or easier to prepare for a projected 1 to 2 foot of sea level rise. You could elevate your house, you could put up seawalls or bulkheads and protect yourself against 1 to 2 foot. If you now start assuming it's going to be 5 foot and the regulations say it's 5 foot, you now have to do something dramatically different, which may not be feasible and may not be cost effective.
Oh yeah, I was going to say much more expensive.
Much more expensive.
I wanted to read an excerpt that you had written to the DEP Assistant Commissioner for Climate and Flood Science, Dave Rosenblatt, in your formal comments. And you wrote, the mere fact that a 5 foot sea level rise is used as a planning and regulatory tool may itself be the impetus for retreat. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Set a standard that can't be met, regulate to that standard, drive fear of that standard, don't provide protections because of that standard, and people will no doubt abandon their homes and communities and retreat. So is this what we're talking about here, Ray? Is this going to be a retreat from the shore, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Bob. I think that's where the department is clearly headed. So there are really 2 different documents coming out. The rules which will be coming out, the flood hazard rules, as you mentioned, which would set a 5 foot sea level rise as the regulatory standard. But DEP just recently came out with their climate change draft resilience strategy. And in that strategy, it lays out how we're going to protect ourselves against climate change, in particular, sea level rise. And that plan clearly says that based on a 5 foot sea level rise, it may become impractical, impossible, or not cost effective to protect, our residents, along the 234 coastal communities who are going to be impacted by this.
234.
So it's a good chunk of the state. A lot of people like to live by not only the oceans and the bays, but these are also tidal rivers from Trenton, including Jersey City, Hoboken,
New Brunswick area.
New Brunswick as well is part of this coastal zone. So what they do is, by requiring a standard that's so high, it becomes infeasible to protect against. It becomes too costly to protect against. So even if we never see that, they end up driving people away from the coast because you can't afford to protect yourself against even the much lower sea level rise that most people are projecting.
Right. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. So, some of us live closer to the shore. We see flooding all the time from really minor storms or, rain or even a high tide. So shouldn't we be doing something? Is that what, is it wrong that DEP is looking to increase protections?
No, absolutely not, Bob. And we fully support coastal protection. We fully support dealing with issues that we know are there. Again, New Jersey is a coastal plain. A good part of our coastal communities are low-lying and they have flooded, and flooding is getting worse. Again, we know, just based on historic evidence, that, again, the last century, there's been a foot of sea level rise.
Right.
That's going to result in more flooding. We know, it's going to, increase, over time, and we have to deal with that. The question is, how much do we have to deal with? What are we going to plan for? And, where are we going to put our resources? If we assume a 1 to 2 foot sea level rise, which we think is more in line with mainstream projections, there are ways to deal with that. We could afford as a society, and we should afford as a society, to protect the Jersey Shore. We shouldn't be retreating from the Jersey Shore.
Right.
Once you set a 5 foot sea level rise projection, the way DEP is, they are now telling everybody, and it's clearly in the report, they're saying towns should start telling the residents, be prepared to leave, find safe places to go, because we can't protect the Jersey Shore anymore.
So it sounds like to me your ask of DEP and Governor Murphy here is consider this kind of 1 to 2 foot protection model that you're advancing yourself, instead of going all out for something that's likely not going to happen.
Well, whenever you're dealing with something so significant, again, we're talking about the future of the Jersey Shore. We're talking about
it's an economic driver.
Absolutely is an economic driver, not only for tourism, it's where people live. And we're also talking about our major cities, Newark, Jersey City, Hoboken. When we're talking about something so significant to the fabric, economically and socially, of the state, we should not be relying on one report that is out of the mainstream of projections. We should be using the best science. We should be consulting, other experts out there. The Rexroad report wasn't even peer reviewed, right. But yet they're relying on that one report to drive all these economic decisions. And we think they should be doing a lot more before they go that far. We have time. We have 80 years to go. We could adopt 1 to 2 foot now, right, and continue to measure, what is sea level rise relative to what projections. And over time, if it proves to be larger than we think it is, we have time to adjust.
Yeah. And by the way, we will be here 80 years from now. I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, let's sit back here again, and we could do this.
It's going to be a good time. Just one last question, Ray. I mean, people at DEP are good people. Do you think they should be the sole voice in terms of what might dramatically happen to our economy, or should the legislature get involved?
The legislature sets the policy of the state. The Department of Environmental Protection, in the executive branch, their job is to implement the policies passed by the legislature. Right. But going this far the way they have, DEP is now beginning to drive that policy. We would very much welcome oversight by the legislature, and we welcome their involvement.
All right. Well, we're very good, Ray. We'll see what happens. Thank you for all you're doing on this, and thanks for being on our show back again.
And Bob, see you in 80 years.
All right. And we'll be back right after this.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
These days, it's anything but business as usual. That's why working together is more important than ever. AT&T is committed to keeping you connected so you can keep your patients cared for, your customers served, your students inspired, and your employees closer than ever. Our network is resilient. Our people are strong. Our job is to keep your business connected. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do.
Welcome back to NJBIA is Minding Your Business. I'm your host, Bob Considine. Well, PTC Therapeutics is a global pharma company focused on rare genetic disorders. While doing that important work, PTC is also doing its part to ensure New Jersey's talent pipeline in life sciences is strong. Joining us now to discuss this is Martin Rexroad, the Chief Culture and Community Officer at PTC Therapeutics, which has its New Jersey headquarters in South Plainfield. Martin, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Bob.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about PTC Therapeutics right off the top.
So PTC Therapeutics strives to give patients hope while they provide us our purpose. They provide us our cause. We were founded here in New Jersey 23 years ago at what today is the Robert Wood Johnson Research Laboratory on Bush campus at Rutgers University in Piscataway. And the mission of PTC has always been to focus on patients' needs for rare diseases, for patients with unmet needs.
Right.
And as we've grown over time, we went from starting in a research lab, and a couple years later, we went into half of one building in South Plainfield to start our first offsite lab. That half a building became one building. That one building became two buildings, became three buildings. Today, we have 5 buildings in South Plainfield, but it doesn't stop there.
Right.
We have a lab in Bridgewater
Right.
now, and we're now opening a gene therapy manufacturing site in Hopewell.
Wow.
And it doesn't stop there because we have employees in over 30 states in the United States, and we have employees in over 20 countries around the world, all focused on rare diseases, all focused on our mission of improving the lives of patients.
Yeah, it is a very noble mission. I'll say this though, you also have this social responsibility mission,
Yes.
which is basically trying to get younger people interested and involved in life sciences. So why is that important to PTC?
Well, so at PTC, again, we focus on unmet needs, and some of those unmet needs are with students in underserved communities. So we have a program where we're working with a school in Passaic where over 90% of the students live at or below the poverty line.
Okay.
And these are really, really smart and gifted kids, and they just need they need a partnership with a biotech. And you know, PTC, when we look around, and when we look at our industry, we want our industry to someday match our communities.
Yeah.
We believe that education enables equal opportunity and equal outcomes. And one of the things we know about drug discovery is sometimes if you can get the intervention applied early enough, it has the greatest effect. So we're working now with a school with children as early as in the 5th grade. And you say, well, the 5th grade. Well, at PTC, our first drug took 12 years to develop, right? The second drug took 14 years, right? So this is a company that knows how to make long-term investments.
Right.
And we know how to bring together resources that we have for developing the company and developing drugs and turn it to helping these kids in STEM careers.
That's great. I want to get into the kids in STEM careers a little bit in a few minutes.
Sure.
But, you also have this internship program.
Right.
When it's called the Talent Pipeline Program, correct?
That's right.
What is this about?
So, Bob, I want to take you back to April or May of 2020. And if you go back to that time, here in New Jersey, the hospitals were filling up.
Yeah.
There were too many people dying. There were no treatments. And in that moment, our CEO and founder, Stu Peltz, looked at what we saw was the lost class of 2020. These were students that were finishing their academic careers from their apartments, from their homes. They didn't have graduations. They didn't have jobs. And some that were lucky enough to have secured jobs or internships, those evaporated. And we said, you know, what can we do to help those students? And so we created this talent pipeline program to hire these graduates and provide them 1 year of real world experience.
Yeah.
And so we brought them on board and this experience, so we have a gene therapy facility. These interns are helping us stand it up. We hired scientists out of universities. They're in the lab doing real science with our scientists. Human resources, regulatory affairs, clinical writing, they're actually doing real work. But we didn't stop there because we know that if you really want to help somebody, there's certain things that you can learn about yourself to make you more effective as an individual and make you more effective as a team member. We taught them that. We're teaching them about leadership development and career development.
Right.
And we're helping them to network. And I can tell you that these 53 interns, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, you know what? I saw a video of these kids. Your kids are young adults, and just a small snapshot. First minute, I learned about regulatory pathways, vendor approvals to assist with manufacturing, gene therapies, marketing and communications, all this stuff. And I just think what a great program. And where do they go from there? They all hopefully get jobs somewhere else, I guess.
Well, some might get hired by us and some might get jobs elsewhere. But what we ensured is that for them, they didn't lose a year.
Yeah.
They've started their careers.
Yeah.
We feel pretty good about it.
Is this something you might continue?
Yeah, we're looking at that. Yes, absolutely.
And by the way, these 53 interns, was this just in New Jersey? Was it across the country or globally?
Great question. They're from 6 countries and they're from different states within the United States. So because we're able to do some of the work virtual,
Right.
we have interns all around the country and around the world.
Right. Why is this investment important to PTC?
Well, so again, we were committed to these students to give them the opportunity to start their careers, right? So we're good at focusing on unmet needs. And these were unmet needs for these recent college students. And we didn't want to wait. You know, we talk about our patients can't wait. And we didn't feel it was fair for these interns to have to wait. And so we did our part to help a few people to jumpstart their career. Some of them will probably join us. Wherever they land, they're going to be better for this 1 year of experience.
Sure, sure. And you mentioned earlier working with younger kids.
Yes.
Is this was it the Students of Science? Was that?
They're part of the story, yes. So let me go back 4.5 years to a school in Passaic. So 4.5 years ago, I got invited to join a biotech advisory board in Passaic. And they needed an industry representative so that they'd have a balance and could qualify for state and federal funding. They had this dream of creating a STEM academy in Passaic, right? 90-some% of these kids at or below the poverty line.
Yeah.
I show up at my first meeting, and Bob, there must have been 30 or 40 people in the room. They're students, they're teachers, they're guidance counselors. Most of the major universities in the state had a representative. There were people from the Department of Education. I looked around and I'm pretty sure I was the only person from industry.
Right.
And I'm listening to these students talk about what they're studying, and I'm listening to what the teachers are saying about what they're teaching. And I even heard a guidance counselor talk about providing career advice to students. And it occurred to me, none of them had been to a biotech.
Right.
Here they're on a biotech career path. So I came back to PTC and I met with our CEO and founder, Stu Peltz, who, as it turns out, his father was a school principal in Chicago.
Okay.
So if anybody knows the challenges the principal has in a city, it's Stu Peltz. And we talked about, we got to get involved.
He must have loved this.
He loved the idea. And we brought them in 4 months. A big yellow school bus from Passaic, New Jersey shows up in our parking lot. And we didn't just give the students a lab tour, which was great. And we did not just tell them about the cutting edge science we're doing. But the most important thing we probably did was we shared the stories of our scientists when they were starting. The challenge when you meet a scientist that's really skilled 20 to 25 years into their career, they look pretty put together.
Right.
But when they go back and tell their stories and they talk about their challenges in their own early STEM careers, all of a sudden, if you're a student in Passaic, that kind of sounds a little bit like what you're thinking and feeling. And all of a sudden they realize, you know what? I can be like those people and I can work in that lab. And I can pursue a career where I try to develop drugs to help patients, just like the people at PTC are doing.
Right. Oh, that's great. Is it a matter of trying to make it fun for them too, that you give them certain things to do?
Well, the first thing we did is we had a week before their first visit, we had a board meeting, and we ordered the same food. Right. So it was wonderful to see their smiling faces. And part of what the students recognized was, wait a second, my teacher's been teaching me stuff they actually use, right? And so the ability to support the teachers in this whole ecosystem of trying to create the next generation of STEM professionals
Yeah.
It's a big partnership.
It is, and I would imagine it's up to them to keep that level of interest and engagement up once you guys leave too.
That's right. And so some of the work that we do, so we talked about students to science, and so we worked with them during the pandemic, and they've provided some virtual labs and some virtual training, so we don't lose a year of academic excellence in the program. We're now at a point where some of their teachers actually send us a list of topics they want scientists to come and help teach, and we connect them with the students. And as well, with Students to Science, we recently did a career fair so that we could talk to more students about what it takes to get into these professions and some of the challenges. And again, it's all about making it accessible and having them believe that could be them.
Yeah, that's great. It's great outreach. What do you've been in HR for, I don't know how many years, I don't want to date you here, but what do you get out of this? I mean, what personally have you seen in your visits with this program?
Yeah, so what feels great about this for me is that, for me personally, my parents raised me with certain values to reach into the community and help people in need. And I'll tell you, one of the magical things about PTC is that my values of wanting to help others in my community, they match up and align with our CEO and founder.
Right.
They match up and align with everybody else at PTC. And when you harness that energy to help others, whether it's for students or for other community outreach, it has a powerful impact. And we know that people are looking for careers with purpose and in meaning. And we definitely have that. And we've had it from the start at PTC, and we're never going to lose that.
That's great. Well, this is some great initiatives done by PTC Therapeutics. If you want to learn more about PTC Therapeutics, you go to ptcbio.com, correct?
That's right. That's right.
That's great. Martin Rexroad, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bob.
In closing today, we take a look at another one of NJBIA's New Good Neighbor Award winners. This time around, we say sip, sip, hooray for the Allied Beverage Group in Elizabeth. Take a look.
Allied Beverage Group was founded by its predecessor companies in 1933. It's involved in the distribution of wine and spirits, has about 6,500 bars and restaurants. Prior to COVID, we hope to have them back, and 1,500 stores. Allied engaged in a merger with one of its New Jersey competitors in 2017. At that time, we were in 5 different facilities. There was the inefficiency of operating that way. So we went about looking for a site that was convenient to transportation, to rail, to the port, let us optimize the building size, and we wound up in Elizabeth at our present site. So talking about the warehouse, the idea is to maximize the footprint. It has high density storage, which means we store very high, and it's hard to find, but we have ample parking. The office was designed differently. It's a corporate headquarters. And again, we wanted an environment facilitating learning and collaboration. And we have 2 special training rooms. One called the Alchemy Room, where we have a lot of mixology classes. Every Friday afternoon, we do classes for our employees. During the week, for our customers, for our employees. And people unwind at the end of the day, and they learn to make drinks. The other room is a wine room, the Enoteca room, and we do a lot of wine education in there. It's designed to expand and handle further future opportunities should we be fortunate enough to get them. And so far, I'm delighted with it. The location's been terrific, so I couldn't have asked for a better location.
All right, great effort there by the Allied Beverage Group, and we thank you for joining us on NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.
These days, it's anything but business as usual. That's why working together is more important than ever. AT&T is committed to keeping you connected so you can keep your patients cared for, your customers served, your students inspired, and your employees closer than ever. Our network is resilient. Our people are strong. Our job is to keep your business connected. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.